So I guess we'll start. If you have questions as I go along, that's fine. You can raise your hand, but chances are, as I go, I'm probably going to answer all your questions anyway. The content of this presentation hasn't changed that much since the beginning, because there aren't any huge changes in the admissions policy lately. We've tried to make the process a bit more open so that people with, going back for a second career can access the program, and we've made it slightly easier, but the rules in general are pretty much the same. So just let me know, who here is in first year of a bachelor's program? Second year? Third year? Fourth year? Okay, that's good. So a lot of you are people who have either finished a program or are at the end of your program. So this presentation's really meant for people who either have applied and didn't get in, or are looking to apply and just want a little more information about the process and how to do things the best way they can. So before I start, let me just show you a couple of resources that I think are going to help you in your travels. One is obviously, this is the main page on the OBC website for future students, future DVM students. One of the good things to do is if you're in Guelph or near Guelph, we have the Future Vets Club that has a lot of really good activities. So if you're a University of Guelph student, you can join, and they have outings to the zoo, to a lot of different places where you learn about different aspects of veterinary medicine. And for those of you who are online, there is an online forum that you can click on, and there's all kinds of questions that people ask and get answered by myself or other members of the club, or people who are actually in the DVM program who come back and give advice. So chances are, if you have a question, a lot of other people have the same question, so don't hesitate to join this group. It's free, and you can get answers to all kinds of questions right here. So that's a good resource for you as well. So important to keep appraised of things that change. If there's any major changes in what happens for the admissions, it's usually going to be on this page or on the subsequent pages. So this is the general first page of our future student page, and here is where we have all the stats for the last 6 years of applications, and the numbers are pretty consistent. So this is the last class. This is what we're going to be talking about today. These are the stats, and you can kind of see some trends. One of the things that you see right away is how many more University of Guelph students apply to our program than non-University of Guelph students. That's for the undergrad cohort. And then there's the grad cohort, which is people who are applying who have done master's or PhD programs and want to apply in a different way. And again, still more University of Guelph students. So the reason you'll see later that we have more students that are in our vet program that are from the University of Guelph purely reflects the application pool. So obviously we have more students in the program from Guelph because more students are applying from Guelph, and for no other reason. Okay, so we're going to talk a bit more about these stats and how the process works. One of the things I'm not going to talk to you about today is prerequisite courses, in the sense that I'm not going to tell you if a particular course that you have is okay, because I'm not the person who would approve your courses. That's Deanna Lundmark in our registrar's office, and her contact information is plastered pretty much everywhere on this site. So if you have any questions about your admission requirements, you'd go here. Academic requirements are the requirements that relate to either courses or to the MCAT, and that's all here. And then the non-academic stuff relates more to the types of experience you need to have, and your references and your interview, which we'll talk about as well. Okay. Another thing that is useful for you is another page of our website that you may or may not have gone to, our current student website. So this would be from the same main page. Instead, you'd go to current students, and then what I'm going to talk about is the curriculum, which is phase 1. For the vet school, there's 4 years after you've finished your bachelor's or you've applied and gotten in. And the DVM program is 4 years long. And this is what you're going to have in first year. These are all the courses. And if you click on them, you can get a course description and tells you what the learning goals are. So that's something you might want to look at in terms of what you're going to get into when you actually get into veterinary medicine. And this explains a little bit why we have the prerequisites that we have in the vet program. So, okay. So the goal of our admissions process in the DVM program really is to choose candidates that we feel will be successful in the DVM program here at the University of Guelph, and also a successful veterinarian down the road. So our process is like this. The first thing we do is we make sure that as a domestic applicant, and I'm going to focus a lot on the undergrad pool, which is the pool from Bachelor of Science usually, but not exclusively. You need to have Ontario residency if you're applying for that pool. If you have dual citizenship, and part of that dual is Canadian, you have to apply as a Canadian. You cannot apply as an American if you have dual American-Canadian citizenship. And that means that you have to have residency of 12 months. It can be cumulative, it doesn't have to be in a row, of 12 months in Ontario. And Canadians hold 105 seats in our program. The biggest group is the 100 undergrads, and what that means is 100 people can apply using their undergrad marks. So even if you've gone off and worked for a couple of years, even if you have done a master's degree or a PhD and you'd still like to apply as an undergrad, you can. The word undergrad just means that you've applied using your undergrad marks, and that's it. And then we have spots for 5 graduate students, and those are people who have done master's degree or PhD and are going to talk a bit about their graduate program when they apply. So their application process is a bit different. And if you want, I can talk about that later, but I'm going to focus mostly on the biggest pool today. And we also have 15 seats for international students, and we take people from all over the world. Most of our international students are Americans, but we do have people from overseas as well. Okay, so this should be very familiar to all of you. Since most of you are in your 4th year and out, you should already have seen this and been taking the courses. You need a minimum of 2 years of a bachelor's degree, and that's for people who have done something like vet tech, where it's a college level course. You still need to do 2 years of university after that. And in those 2 years, or in your bachelor's degree, you need to do 2 biological sciences, a cell biology, a genetics, a biochemistry, a statistics, and 2 humanities social sciences. And if you're going to apply, let's say for next fall, for fall 2014, all of those courses have to be done by this December 31st, because we need to have your marks before the competition. And that means that we won't get them unless they're done by that time, okay? So take a look at those courses, and then let me just go out for a second and go back to the courses you're taking in your first year. So biochemistry, that's why biochemistry is a prerequisite, because in your first year you take veterinary biochemistry. Veterinary anatomy, physiology. Physiology is a good idea if you haven't taken that as a course. A lot of our students say that that they took physiology and it prepared them very well for this course. Histology, you need to have cell biology to do well in histology. The Art of Veterinary Medicine is a course that runs through the first 3 years of veterinary medicine here, and in the first 2 years it focuses a lot on communication modules, learning how to communicate with clients and in teams. Veterinary medical genetics, genetics is the prerequisite for that. Health management, statistics is very good for that, and you'll be taking epidemiology as well. So that's also why we ask you for statistics. And in general, it's always good to take courses that relate to animal biology animal physiology, mammalian anatomy, things like that, just to help you get prepared for the program. It isn't necessary, but people who have taken those courses do feel that they're better prepared for some of our courses in first year. But if you have a Bachelor of Arts and Science degree or a bachelor's degree in chemistry and have done the prerequisites, you can still do this program. Okay. So everyone's clear on that, right? It's not news for everybody, right? Okay. So the first cut for getting into our vet school is all numeric. It's all about your academics. So this process is blind, which means that when we look at your numbers, we don't know how old you are. We don't know your gender. We don't know what university you're applying from. So there's absolutely no favoritism for people who have done their undergrad here at the University of Guelph. We don't even know what university you're from. All we look at are your numbers. We look at the average of your 8 required courses. So the 8 courses that I talked about. So when you're choosing which course you want to put forward as your 8, obviously they have to follow the rules, right? They have to be in a full-time semester with 5 courses. At the University of Guelph, 5 courses translates to 2.5 credits, or in other universities it can be 15 credits depending on how they weigh things. But you need to have them approved if you're not from the University of Guelph, and you would do that through Deanna Lundmark. And the trick is to choose the courses that fulfill all the rules with the highest marks. Do not choose courses you think that will be more impressed by. Just choose the ones with the highest marks, because you want to be as competitive as you can be. And that means that if you've taken 8 biology courses and all of them fit and they can all be used, you take the 2 with the highest marks. Last 2 full-time semesters, that's where we choose the last 2 semesters that you've done that fulfill all the requirements, that they have 5 courses per semester, that they're in our definition of full-time, and then we will take the average. So let's say you finished your Bachelor of Science and you take a non-degree semester to get some better marks. So in that case, what we would do is we would take that last non-degree semester, which may be a fall semester, and then we'd go back to the winter of the year before and take that full-time semester and put them together and come up with an average. That's how we do it. And if you at one point took only 4 courses per semester, then we would ignore that semester and go back and find the next that would apply for full-time. Now we understand that sometimes things happen. Sometimes you might get an illness, or that there might be extenuating circumstances, and that you can't take your 5 courses per semester. We do have an appeals process here for the DVM program. So if you have a justifiable cause for not being able to take a full-time semester, and you want to use one of the courses in that semester for a prerequisite, you can write a letter of an appeal and provide supporting documentation, like a letter from your doctor saying that you had to take a lower course load, and the admissions committee will consider that. And then the MCAT, everyone loves the MCAT, 20% of your marks. So the 8 courses are 40%. The last 2 full-time semesters are 40%, and the MCAT becomes 20%, and we put the numbers all together and come up with, we rank everybody from top to bottom, and usually the top 200 are invited for an interview. Okay, so that's how it works. And then this year, the interview was worth 35%. So this number, after the interview, becomes 65% of the total consideration. So you can see that really the most important thing are marks. And if you want to make yourself a more competitive applicant, you have to do well. And you have to put forward your best marks. So this is where I tell you that if you need help, get help. Don't let your marks hold you back. If this is your dream and you want to do it, then if you need tutoring, get tutoring. If you're having difficulty, get support. Okay? Don't let your marks hold you back. Okay, And then what we also do is we look at your background information form. Especially important are the referee assessments, because a negative reference, especially by a veterinarian who says that in no circumstances should you be a colleague of theirs in the future, that will damage your chances of getting into our program. And very negative letters of reference can lead to you not being invited for an interview. So when you ask for your letters of reference, be sure that you ask for a positive letter of reference. Make sure that the person who's going to write you the reference is comfortable giving you a really glowing reference. Now, have people here seen what the references look like, what they have to fill in? Has anyone not seen it? Okay. What I'm going to do, just for the sake of the people online, is I'm going to show you a sample of what it looks like. Let me just close this up for a sec. I've loaded it up. So, okay, so this is the assessment form that was used last year. So basically what the referees have to do is they have to fill in a grid, relating to us how they see you in terms of a whole bunch of different characteristics that we feel are important for veterinary medicine. And I mean, some of them are common sense, ability to work with others. As a veterinarian, you're rarely going to work alone. You're going to be working with other people in a practice. You're going to have to work with the owners of all the animals. So communication skills are extremely important. Leadership, obviously intellectual capacity is important for making it through the program and being a veterinarian. And there's a whole bunch of other types of characteristics that we ask them to go through. And at the end, there's a very important question. Would you employ this applicant on a long-term basis? If you could. Yes, no, not applicable. And if no, please explain why. And this is an area where some people are very blunt about the fact that they may or may not feel that you're appropriate as a future veterinarian. And that we take into consideration. So that's why I say it's very important that when you ask for a letter of reference, you make sure that they're comfortable giving you a very good reference and that they can assess you at least on a lot of these skills. Because what's also not helpful for us is if someone sends us a letter and a grid that has a whole bunch of have not observed. That's not going to help us. We need to be able to assess whether or not we feel that you're a good candidate for our program and as a veterinarian. So that's really important. Okay? Okay. So, has anyone here gone through the multiple mini interviews yet? Okay, so a few of you. How was it? Yeah.
It wasn't too bad.
Yeah, you didn't mind it too much?
No,
Yeah, okay. It goes really fast. You think you're going to be there for 80 minutes, oh my God, and then it's over. How about someone here? What'd you think?
I thought it went better than it did, I guess.
Okay. And you, when you got your email saying you did or didn't get into the program, you learned your score, right? We do release the score. So was it better or worse than you expected?
Worse.
Was it worse? Okay. And you?
Yeah, worse. But it kind of gave me an idea of like what I need to improve on.
Okay. All right. So the way it works, the multiple mini interview, it can be intimidating. What it is, it's in McKinnon in May. And what it is it's a circuit, and it has 8 stations. And each station is a different scenario. And the scenario can be anything relating to you as a possible veterinarian or in a particular situation, or you're working in a clinic and you see this, what do you think? And usually they'll ask you to say, so what do you do in this situation? And the situation, there's a variety of large animal, small animal. Really, there's no right answer to the scenario. What they want you to do is to be able to articulate what you think is the best possible outcome and why, and all the reasons that factor into that decision. So really, it's not so much about the answer that you give, it's more about how well you think on your feet, how reasonable your explanation is, and how big a picture you've looked at. And that, I think, is, you know, it's an important thing to be able to do. It's not necessarily an easy thing to do in 8 minutes, but it's something that, you know, we look at how well you communicate during the scenarios, as well as being able to deal with different issues within the scenario. One of the stations deals just with veterinary experience in terms of your experience, and when you go into that station, the person or the people that are going to be interviewing have a copy of the background information form that you've submitted with your veterinary experience. So they're going to ask you about some of the things that you've experienced. So it's a good chance for you to really, you know, show off how much you learned and some of the things that you discovered while you were working in a vet clinic or alongside a veterinarian in, you know, any other setting. And it's a good chance for you to really shine. So that's another area. Okay. The reason that we switched to using the multiple mini interview about 3 years ago was because, for a variety of reasons. One is that we used to do the typical interview where you'd come in and for a half hour you'd be seated in front of 2 people who would ask you all kinds of questions. So in order to make things a lot less subjective and a lot more objective, the MMI makes you go through a circuit where you have 16 people who interview you instead of just 2. So the impact of one person's opinion is less, and you get a much more objective assessment. The other thing that's really important about the MMI is it's a much more reliable process, and there is a lot of indication now from the medical school setting that it does predict strength in clinical setting. So it does end up predicting success in the medical field once you get out. The other thing that's great about the MMI is we've already done all that assessment of your academic ability when we've looked at your courses and we've looked at your last 2 full-time semesters and your MCAT. So this is a different thing. We're measuring things that are not academic. It's not testing specific knowledge or experience in any given subject. And what we really want to see is how you respond to the scenarios. Not so much, you know, we're looking for different traits or different attributes. Not so much, you know, you don't have to necessarily know a lot about a certain area, but we want you to be able to express what you think and why you think that. Okay, so this is a summary of the process. What we do, again, is we take all the applicants and we do our number crunching with the 40%, and the 20%. And then we get the list from the admissions office, the registrar, of all the people who are in the top 200 and how many people apply. And what we do is we look, the admissions committee takes the files of all the people in the top 220 or so, and we read through their application. And mostly what they're looking at are things like your references. So this is where we see if there's problems with your application. If you have hardly any experience, if you have a negative reference, if there's anything problematic in your application, then this may lead to you, even if you're in the top 200, you may not be invited for an interview. So again, like I said, it's very important that you make sure that all of your experience, all of your information is correct in your background information form, or BIF, is correct, and that your letters of recommendation are really positive. Then, once we have the top 200 people, we invite them for an interview. Then they come in, and what we do, in addition to scoring people, is that if there's a negative flag that comes up during your interview, the assessors will write it down. And by negative flag, I mean that something very either negative or unusual happened during the interview. And a typical example, but not typical in the sense that it happens, typical in the sense that this would be a red flag, is if the person who is being interviewed made racist remarks, something like that, where the person who's interviewing you goes, "Oh, that's not a good thing." And if anyone in the interview process had a negative or a red flag while they were being interviewed, and it was considered serious enough, they may not be considered further. So after that process is done, then what we do is we rank everyone again using the interview as 35% and the marks as 65%, and then we decide to admit the remaining list. Okay? Is that good for everyone understands that? It's clear? Okay. So let's look at what happened last year. So we had way more women than men apply. This is for the total pool. This is, includes the international students. So just to give you a total idea of, for the 120 spots, this is how many people applied. Of the 465 that applied last year, 202 were from the University of Guelph, and 214 were not. But the reason the numbers look fairly even is because most of the non-University of Guelph applicants are the international students applying from the US and elsewhere. Okay? So what we ended up doing is we interviewed 238 students total, and then we admitted 116. So the class of 2016 has 116 students. That means 100 undergrad, 5 graduate students, and 11 international students. Okay? So when you look at the numbers, oops, sorry about that, 64% of the class made it in after their first application. 33% it was their second application, 2% it was their third, and 1% made it on their fourth. You can only apply to our vet school 4 times, and then we won't accept you. That can be a mixture of applying through the undergraduate cohort and the graduate cohort. It's up to you which one you want to apply for if you have a master's or a PhD degree. And these are the marks. So everyone knows mean and median. I don't have to explain what those 2 terms mean. High school stats, remember? Yes? Anyone not remember? Okay, good. So they're very close, actually. They're the same for the last 2 full-time semesters. So 86.3 is the average, and the range is 76.3 to 95% for the last 2 full-time semesters average. And then for the 8 required marks, the average is about 87, and the range again is also 77.75 to 96.1. But I just want to make something very clear to everybody, okay? The person who got this mark for their the last 2 full-time semesters is not the same person that got this. Chances are the person who got the lowest mark in their last 2 full-time semesters is closer to this for their 8 required courses, or has gotten very high. So usually people, you know, if they've got a low mark in one, do better in the other. That's why, like, again, it's very important that you choose your 8 courses and you choose them for the highest marks, right? And we also know that people tend to do better as they go up in their bachelor's degree. So, you know, maybe they took biochemistry in 2nd year, didn't do that well, so their 8 courses aren't as high, but they really did well in 3rd or 4th year, and those are the marks that they use, that were used for their 2 full-time semesters. So don't be fooled. If you have mid-70s or a little bit higher in both categories, your chances are not very good. You are not a very competitive applicant. The only way you can improve is by bringing up one of those numbers, or both, even better. And again, because your marks are the majority of the process, you can rewrite the MCAT and do better, but it doesn't have as much of an impact as bringing up your marks. Although it's not a bad idea if you want to do that. If you did really badly in the MCAT, sure, you can get a few more percentage points, but this is really the meat of the application. So the MCAT, there's no minimum to apply, and what we'll do is if you've written the MCAT a few times, we'll just take the best numbers from one test, not just take the best verbal, best biological, right? And the other thing you need to know is your MCAT score will expire in 5 years. So it had to have been written within the last 5 years. The average for the interview scores, this may be a surprise, was almost 75%. And the range was from 60 to 92. So that's quite a range, but most people scored in the mid-70s. Okay, any questions so far? Wow, okay, great. All right, what can I do to improve my academic average? Well, I think we talked a lot about that. Because your courses are so important, you can either do an extra semester. Let's say you finished your bachelor's and you want to try to improve your GPA. You can do a non-degree semester. Don't make the mistake of going into a master's degree and thinking you can redo your undergrad courses. You can't do it that way. You need to do a non-degree semester. Okay, you don't have to redo your whole bachelor's degree, just do one more semester or two if you want to do that too. And be careful about the rules around level and about full-time. You guys know about the 60-40 rule for third and fourth year, right? So in third and fourth year, 60% of your courses have to be either third or fourth year. They're interchangeable. It's not that you have to take third year courses in third year and fourth year courses in fourth. It has to be either or. So those are interchangeable. And in that year, and the other courses can be at any level that you want. So if you want to take a first year course, provided you haven't taken a similar course or the same course at a first year level, you can do that in your third year or fourth year. So if you've never taken Spanish before, as an example, and you want to do that in your third year, you can do that. Animal and veterinary experience is very important. Now, I told you that the admissions committee and the admissions process, basically what they're trying to do is they're trying to make people more prepared for the program, both academically and not. So animal experience and veterinary experience is very important. It's not only important for the actual process of admissions, but it's important for you once you come to the vet school. Because in first year, you're going to be working on animals right away. And if you've never touched a cow before, you might be a little intimidated the first time. You'll end up doing it. I mean, you'll have to, right? But animal experience with a variety of species is really a good idea when you're going into vet school. First, you're going to be more comfortable. And the other philosophy is, if you haven't tried it, how will you know that you'll like it or that you don't like it? The veterinary profession is huge. There are so many things you can do with your degree. And I know a lot of people come into it saying, okay, I'm going to be a small animal practitioner, I'm going to work in a clinic in my hometown. But you know what? If you've never worked with horses before, or with pigs, or with llamas, you'll never know that you love it. And that happens to a lot of the students here. So the more you try, the more you see how much you love things, or that you may not like things, and that's good too, because it'll define for you the area you want to work in. But you won't know until you try. And that'll keep going on while you're in vet school. There's going to be a lot of opportunity for you to try different things, and the more you try, the better it is for you, and the more networking you can do with your future colleagues in the profession. Okay? The other thing that's really important is not so much the amount of hours that you do at a clinic, but what you do while you're there. So if you've done 500 hours at a vet clinic and all you've done is clean cages and helped at the reception, not as good as doing a really intense week where you actually work alongside the veterinarian and learn a lot about the diseases that the animals get and how you treat them and interesting cases and why, how they diagnose, why they diagnose, how they, the issues that are coming up for veterinarians right now. Those are the important things. So when you do your veterinary experience, it's really important to try to learn as much as you can. Okay, so for the referee assessments, I've already mentioned how very important they are. Don't make the mistake of asking a family member or a friend of the family to write you a reference, because usually that means that it's not a very professional reference. I mean, it has to be unbiased, and it has to come from someone who we consider can assist you in a professional manner. And usually that means people who have supervised you in some way. It could be someone who's worked with you as a coach in a sport, that's fine, but it should be someone who is in a position above you that can assess you properly. And again, please make sure when you ask for a reference, make sure that the person doing the reference is comfortable giving you a very good reference. So it's in your rights to ask, well, can you give me a really good reference? And if they're, they should be able to tell you whether or not they're comfortable doing that. And if they're not, then find someone else. Okay, how can I improve my interview skills? So communication is really important, and sometimes, it's really difficult to get everything you want to say out in 8 minutes. You have 2 minutes to read the scenario and then 8 minutes to go into the room and tell them everything that you want to tell them about everything you've thought about for the scenario. And, usually you go out and then 5 minutes later you go, oh, I forgot to say that, but it's too late, you can't go back. So think on your feet. Very important, being able to communicate accurately all the things that you want to say. Those are really good skills to have. So there's a few things that you might do to help tweak those a little bit if those are a bit of an issue for you. You can take public speaking courses or workshops. Every university has a career services center that will probably help you in this way or provide you with mock interviews. You can go to Toastmasters, which is a club that helps people with their public speaking, which is, by the way, one of the biggest fears that most people have. And you can do mock interviews with friends and colleagues. I don't know if anyone has done this, but while we were doing the MMI this year, I went on Google and Googled multiple mini interview questions, and they had some sample questions from some of the medical schools, and boy, were some of them interesting. Take a look at that and see what would you say in that situation. And I know that the Future Vets Club is planning to do a mock multiple mini interview sometime, possibly in March. So watch their website and see if you're able to attend that. That usually fills up pretty quickly. Okay, so are there any questions?